We've all heard of the famous lost NFL championship of the Pottsville Maroons in 1925 and the controversy surrounding it. But however, a title controversy brewed just a few seasons earlier concerning a now defunct franchise when the league was still under its original name, the American Professional Football Association banner. We have an expert coming on from a few years ago in an interview to tell us all about a controversy in the NFL title, coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we have a great edition as we're going to go back in time to a November 2021 interview we did with the Football Learning Academies founder and former PFRA president, Ken Crippen. Ken and I were talking about some of the early Buffalo professional football teams, and one in particular caught my eye here as I was reviewing back through some old tape and checking out some of the stories. And Ken had a really interesting facet and story of a lost championship in the 1921 APFA season, which a year later would become the National Football League, the NFL. And Ken tells it so eloquently, I'm going to have him tell it again here in this recording from 2021.
Well, in 1921, I would say that's probably the most interesting season that Buffalo had. They did come in second, but there's kind of an interesting story associated with that. So the Decatur Staleys became the Chicago Staleys, and then the following years when they became the Chicago Bears. So both of them were the strongest teams. Buffalo had a record of 9-1-2, and Chicago had a record of 9-1-1. But you kind of have to go back a little bit from the beginning of the season to talk about some of the things that happened. One was Buffalo scheduled some what they call quote-unquote exhibition games at the end of the year. So they were 8-0-2 at the end of the year. They thought that they had won the championship, everything was great, but they figured they would try to earn a little bit more money and scheduled a couple of exhibition games. The problem is that they did win the first exhibition game. It was against Akron. The second one was against Chicago, and they lost that game. The issue comes in is they beat Chicago earlier in the season, but then lost to Chicago at the end. So back in those days, the tiebreakers were, it was usually the second game they considered counted more than the first. So Chicago thought that they had the edge because they beat Buffalo the second game. Then you also add into it that when you sum up the total amount of points played between the two games, Chicago had 16 points and Buffalo had 14 points. So again, Chicago said that, okay, we're the champions because we outscored you in the two games that we played. Now, keep in mind back then that they didn't determine the championship on the field. They determined the championship in a vote in the league meetings in the offseason. So that was the case that Chicago made, was that we beat them in the second game, which counts more than the first, and we outscored them when you look at the other two games. Buffalo claimed that the last two games were just exhibition games, and so they shouldn't count in the standings. Buffalo is undefeated, and so therefore they should be the champions. Another wrinkle comes in the fact that there really was no official end to the season. It's not like today where it's a 17-game season, you have specific playoff games, and that's it. That's how you determine your champion. Back then, a lot of times teams would end up playing a lot of lesser teams at the end of the season just to kind of pad their results. So when they went into the off-season voting, their record would look better, they'd have a better chance of moving up in the standings. That's essentially what happened, is that Chicago ended up putting in some scrub games toward the end of the season just to make the record look better. They had these arguments that we had already talked about with Buffalo, stating that, well, we beat the second best team there in Buffalo, so that makes us the champion. The league agreed, and they made Chicago the champion. So obviously Buffalo was not happy with that, but that's the way the league stood. And regardless of how many times Buffalo has gone back to the NFL to try to get their championship reinstated, I guess, or instated in the first place, all those arguments failed, and George Halas wins his first NFL championship back in 1921.
We want to thank Ken Crippen for letting us use that and for sharing that brilliant information with us. You can check out more of Ken's work at the Football Learning Academy, footballlearningacademy.com. We have a link for it in the show notes of this podcast. You can check out Ken's work there. And we have some of his books. We have links to that are available through our Amazon associate link to get your mind into the football history that Ken shares with us on that great Buffalo team from 1921 and more. So we thank you for joining us for this bit of history, and enjoy your day. And until next time, have a great Gridiron Day. That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.